People who do an awful lot of stitching use an awful lot of floss. I'm Michelle, this is my romantic tangle, and this morning I was reading a discussion where someone had asked for advice about how to organize a wonderfully tremendous amount of DMC. I think she said 10,000 skeins, and some of the advice that people were giving her was making me very, very hostile. I have strong opinions on floss organization, apparently. So I thought I would do a video and share my advice on how I would tackle a project that huge. And the absolute first thing I would do, this assumes that you already own the floss, that you have a safe place to store the floss and don't need to be making fast decisions, and that you plan on doing a whole lot of stitching. Someone who only does a small project once in a blue moon probably doesn't need a huge floss stash, but someone who does a lot of big projects can go through floss amazingly fast. First thing I would do would be to take a deep breath and think things through. I would not make drastic decisions in a hurry. At one point, about 20 years ago, I was 100% positive I was never going to cross stitch again. Things had happened, stitchy related things and life related things, and I was convinced I was never going to touch any of this stuff ever again. I was going to knit, I was going to quilt, I was never going to stitch. That happened about the time we were moving into this house, and I packed it all up in boxes from the liquor store and shoved it into the darkest, most remote corner of the sewing room, which has eaves and furniture, and trust me, that dark remote corner was very hard to get to when I finally realized a few years ago I wanted to dig it back out. I cannot tell you how glad I am I saved everything, because at the point where I started stitching again, I could not have afforded to rebuild those supplies from scratch. So, assuming you already own it, assuming you have the space, don't rush into things. Consider what kind of stitching you do. If you stitch from patterns that go calling for specific flosses by numbers, I would put things in numerical order. If you design your own pieces and need all of the shades of green together, by all means do it that way, but come up with an organizational system that works with the way you stitch. I go by number, and what I have done with my floss, after I pulled everything back out of those boxes, I went through and I took all of the big projects that I had kitted up, or most of the big projects I had kitted up, and I pulled all that DMC out, and I reorganized it so I could kit up what I wanted to be working on at that time. I went through and I sorted into Ziploc bags into groups of 100. So all the 800s, all the 900s, all the 3700s, whatever they were. And it's not super quick to find the skein that I need, but it works. It's better than having a big random box. At the point where I started to overflow the Ziploc bags, I would further divide it. So I would have like 800 to 850, and then 851 to 899 in separate bags. You could probably narrow it down to 25. It's just a way to kind of keep them in order so that you can find what you need. And I like the Ziploc bag method because it doesn't require buying any expensive storage. I use the super cheap paper bobbins from Walmart because I'm bobbinating for a project at a time. No, they do not last forever, but when they wear out, I will write the number on a new one. And because I have got multiple projects going, each with lots and lots of colors, I need a lot of floss bobbins, more than a full set of the colors of DMC. I did eventually take one skein of each color and wind them onto bobbins, and I have a master set which on a good day has one skein each of all of the colors and some overflow that is leftovers from other projects. I haven't updated it in a while, so when you stitch, you use things up, and I'm currently missing colors, and At some point when I've got some extra time and patience, I'm going to go through and figure out what colors I'm missing and fill in the gaps again. Assuming that we are really talking about a literal ton of floss, as I was sorting into the groups of 100, I would also be going through and kitting up big projects that I know I want to stitch. I did a lot of Marty Bell and Thomas Kincaid and things that call for 100 colors. So I would start pulling out what I need for each of those projects, because you can always change your mind. You can always put it back. I would not worry about duplicates. One of the things I saw coming up over and over again in this conversation was, you're going to have too many duplicates. You shouldn't keep more than 4 of any one color. I think I've bought 10 skeins of 3371 so far this year and used every last one of them. As I go through and I sort by number, and I have done this before with some of the thrift store hauls I've added to my stash, I pick out anything that's not DMC or Anchor or CXC or whatever brand you choose to work with. Anything that is weirdly damaged, anything that is hopelessly tangled. And because I like to do embroidery with hot iron transfers, I will just put that all into its own little bag, and when I need to do a red flower on a bookmark, that's where I will go first, because I don't need an exact shade of red. I don't worry about dye lots. If I am doing a specific project where I need big blocks of one color and it has to match, I've done, I think it was after the rain that had just huge expanses of sky, I would have gone and bought brand new skeins of that shade of blue to make sure that there weren't any weird transitions. Or I would use one strand from one skein and one strand from another skein and not stitch in square blocks so I didn't have definite lines if the colors didn't match up. I think that, hey, it works in knitting if you're trying to transition from one dye lot to another. I don't see why it wouldn't work in counter cross stitch. There probably is such a thing as too much floss. I don't think I'm there myself, and I don't think anyone should feel pressured to get rid of their floss because somebody else who doesn't live with them, isn't related to them, and has no authority over them decides that they have too much floss. I got a really interesting comment the day I showed all of my yarn stash. So yes, there are people out there who will happily tell you that you have more than you need, but you don't have to listen to them. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you would do things differently than I would. I'd love to hear about it. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle. This whole thought process has me a little bit motivated to go through my sewing baskets and pull out the little Ziploc bags of floss that are left over from other projects and maybe get stuff a little better organized. Because I will totally admit that if I can't find a skein of that one color I need, I will stop and buy a new skein while I'm in town. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with more videos soon.